Well, welcome everybody to today's Modern Mentor presentation, Getting Engaged, Advocating for the Fire Service on Capitol Hill in 2019. We are joined today by Executive Director Bill Webb and Director of Government Affairs Sean Carroll from the Congressional Fire Services Institute. The discussion today will provide information on how you can make a difference and become engaged with working with Congress to support programs benefiting our nation's first responders. A little bit about our presenters today. Bill is the Executive Director of the Congressional Fire Services Institute, a nonprofit, nonpartisan policy institute designed to educate members of Congress about the challenges and needs of the fire and emergency services. During his 23 years as CFSI Executive Director, Bill has worked closely with members of Congress and other national fire service leaders to advocate for federal programs and legislation that benefit our nation's firefighters and emergency services personnel. In addition, he has delivered presentations throughout the country and written numerous articles on advancing the fire service issues on Capitol Hill. Bill is the Vice Chairman of the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation and an honorary member of the Vienna Volunteer Fire Department, Delaware Volunteer Firefighters Association, and the International Association of Firefighters Local 36. Sean Carroll is the Director of Government Affairs for the Congressional Fire Services Institute, a position he has held since joining the Institute in 2002. As the Director of Government Affairs, Sean is responsible for tracking all federal legislation and programs relating to the fire and emergency services, maintaining communication with members of Congress and federal officials, and designing educational programs targeting Capitol Hill and the whole White House. Sean also coordinates the activities of CFSI's National Advisory Committee, a coalition of over 40 fire and emergency services organizations. Before joining CFSI, Sean worked for United States Senator Susan M. Collins as her Director of Constituent Services. A native of Gray, Maine, Sean has received his bachelor's in political science from the University of Maine in 1998. Thank you, Bill and Sean, for joining us today. The stage is now yours.
Thank you, Jamie. And before I begin, I'm hoping that everyone can see the first screen that we have working together to educate Congress, ISFSI CFSI partnership. So, having said that, again, thank you, Jamie. Thank you, President Wells and past President Pegram and Lee Hubbard for the support you provide to CFSI throughout the years. I know you have a great history starting up in 1961. And I've been at CFSI since 1985, so I've had a great pleasure of dealing with many of your leaders throughout the years, and look forward to working with you again throughout in the future to advance some of the challenges that we face with the fire service, in the fire service. Sean and I are going to talk about the 116th Congress. We're going to talk about the importance of getting engaged in the legislative process. There's a former Speaker of the House, his name is Tip O'Neill, and he once said that politics is local. It's important that fire service officials communicate with their elected representatives. You are the ones that elect them. You are the ones that should be advocating directly to them, and their job is to listen to you as the constituents that they are serving back in Washington, D.C. There's no question we're facing some challenging times in the 116th Congress with the federal government in a partial shutdown for the past 22, 23 days. And one of those agencies that is closed down is the Department of Homeland Security, which of course houses the Federal Emergency Management Agency, the United States Fire Administration, of course, the grant programs. So we sit here waiting anxiously for some type of resolution between the administration and the Congress. Hopefully something will happen here soon so that the federal government can continue to carry forward its mission to address the needs of this great nation of ours. What I'd like to do, we're going to kind of break this up. I'll talk a little bit about CFSI, what our role is, what our history is, and then Sean, as Jamie did mention, is our government affairs guru. He is the one that's up on Capitol Hill on a daily basis, working with the government affairs directors from the other organizations to talk to members of Congress, again, to discuss these issues that impact the fire service as a whole. CFSI was established in 1989. We're a nonprofit, nonpartisan policy institute. Our primary mission is to work with members of Congress and their staff to, again, educate them about the challenges and the needs. What are the challenges at the local level in terms of the training, the equipment that the fire services needs? What are the challenges that are coming down the pike? We're seeing a lot in the area of mental wellness. We're seeing a lot with the opioid crisis. And so you can almost look at almost all the federal agencies, and within each of the federal agency, there is probably a program in each of these agencies that has an impact on the fire service. So again, Sean's the one that tracks the legislation. He is the one that serves as the liaison between the Congress and to a large extent the other fire organizations so that we can go up to Capitol Hill and speak in one voice. We are an umbrella organization, and most importantly, we're privately funded. AFG and SAFER has provided over $13 billion in funding to the fire service, but we have a policy in place that we do not receive any of those funds because we want to make sure that those funds go out to your members, your firefighters, your instructors, again, to ensure that they have what it takes to respond to those millions of calls each and every day. We have a 5-member board of directors. Some of these names might look familiar. Bill Genoway, Vice President of VFIS Insurance. Jim Estep, former President of IFC. Giff Swain used to be President of the Fire and Emergency Manufacturers and Services Association. Chris Neal had a great history with ISFSI. Now he's involved with the Red Cross. Steve Austin, a lot of you know, is Mr. Fire Service. He's with the Delaware Volunteer Fire Service Organization, International Association of Arson Investigators, Cumberland Valley Volunteer Firefighters Association, and a number of other organizations. In terms of the staff, we are a small organization. We're a 3-person staff. It's myself serving as the executive director. Again, Sean is the director of government affairs. And Stephen Trammell is our development manager. I'll talk a little bit about the National Fire and Emergency Services Seminar and Dinner Program at the tail end of my presentation. Stephen is the one that does all the logistical work in that regard. What makes CFSI special? What separates us from the other organizations? In Sean's bio, Jamie mentioned that he is the liaison. He is the one that oversees the operations of the National Advisory Committee. We have 38 members that serve on our National Advisory Committee. This organization convenes semi-annually to discuss issues of common concern to the fire service. It provides an opportunity for each of these organizations to discuss what's on their minds, what issues can we address together. We have a resolutions process in place whereby organizations can bring resolutions forward calling for CFSI to take a position on a particular issue, whether it's the T-band issue, whether it's funding for AFG, SAFER, any other issue, and that becomes our marching orders. When we get these resolutions approved, that gives us the direction, that gives us the ability to go up to Capitol Hill and advocate for specific issues that are near and dear to the fire service as a whole. So you can see it's like the alphabet soup of the fire service, all these organizations that serve on our advisory committee. Justin Arnold is your primary person that serves on the advisory committee. So if you ever have any questions about the types of issues ISFSI is bringing forward at the NAC, if Lee can't provide that information to you, certainly contact Justin because he does a great job representing you folks. And again, this kind of demonstrates what our role is all about. You've got 38 organizations. You know, a lot of times these organizations have their separate parochial issues that they want to address with members of Congress. So be it. That's great. But when you have these core issues that impact the fire service as a whole, this is kind of where we come in. Sean is the one that sits down with all the other organizations and finds out what are the issues, what are the ones we can work together on, how can we develop some type of legislative strategy so we can go up to Capitol Hill and present one voice, present one message. And it's worked rather effectively for us throughout the years as we've increased funding for AFG, we have reauthorized USFA, had a number of other important pieces of legislation approved throughout the years. And this past session, 115th, I would say was one of our most successful sessions in the history of the Institute. And again, Sean will talk about some of those issues that we worked on together. We also have what's called our little fireside chat. We meet on a monthly basis. We bring in all the national organizations, the major organizations, sit down really at the table and just work our way around and again, find out what are the core issues that are affecting these organizations that you see in front of us. The Congressional Fire Services Caucus. Some of you are familiar. This might be for some of you, this might be your first exposure to CFSI and the caucus. Sometimes people get the Institute and the caucus mixed up, or they think that they're one and the same. They are not. The Fire Caucus is comprised of members of Congress. That got started in 1987 by former Congressman Curt Weldon of Pennsylvania, when there was actually a fire that broke out in one of the congressional office buildings 2 doors down from Weldon's office. It was the office of the Speaker of the House, Jim Wright. Again, 1987, model workplace, millions of people visiting these congressional buildings on an annual basis. When that fire broke out, there was no fire sprinkler, there was no smoke alarm, the fire extinguishers were not properly charged, as were the hose lines. And so Congressman Weldon saw this as a wake-up call. He saw this as a wake-up call for members of Congress to take a more serious interest in their workplace, but also in the types of issues that they can be addressing up on Capitol Hill. So Curt came up with the idea to form the Fire Caucus, and since 1987, it remains one of the largest caucuses on Capitol Hill, and it's unquestionably, in my mind, one of the most reputable and effective caucuses. This is a bipartisan caucus, and it's very important to understate the word bipartisan, especially in today's political climate. What you see down below are the co-chairs of our Fire Caucus. These are 4 Republicans, 4 Democrats, 4 senators, 4 congressmen who have pledged together to work in a spirit of bipartisanship to address the issues that impact the nation's fire service. If you look at these members and you think about the committees that they serve on, you have members who serve on the Committee of Homeland Security, Appropriations, Finance. Those are very important committees for the fire service. A lot of important measures go through those committees. So it's great when you can have these caucus leaders serving in those positions. At the far end, you have Congressman Steny Hoyer of Maryland. Unfortunately, I misspelled Maryland. But anyway, Congressman Hoyer is now the majority leader of the House. And so we have very distinguishable members serving as our co-chairs, and these members serve together, again, as caucus co-chairs in the spirit of bipartisanship to advance our issues. We lost one member, Congressman Dave Reichert of Washington, who announced his retirement, and when we are in the position now to fill that slot. So again, I talked about the legislative accomplishments that we accomplished in 2018. And when I say we, I mean CFSI, I mean ISFSI, IFF, IFC, NVFC, NFP, all the organizations that were willing to sit down at the same table, work together to again, address the issues that are of common concern. So what I'd like to have Sean do is talk a little bit about some of those legislative initiatives that we got approved. And I would like to, again, thank each and every one of you who is participating in this call, who called up your member of Congress, who wrote a letter to your member of Congress, again, asking them to take a position on these types of issues that we're going to be addressing. So Sean, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thanks, Bill. As Bill mentioned, the last Congress, 115th Congress, was probably one of the most successful we've had on Capitol Hill, which is kind of ironic because if you watch the news, you'd think nothing happened on Capitol Hill in the past 2 years. But the fire service organizations were very busy, and we had quite a bit of success. So one of our main priorities going into the Congress was to reauthorize the assistance to firefighters, the SAFER grant programs, and to reauthorize the U.S. Fire Administration. As some of you who have been following this might remember, the prior reauthorization for these programs had placed a sunset on the 2 grant programs, Fire and SAFER, as well as the Fire Prevention Safety Grant Program, which is built into AFG. That meant that if Congress did not reauthorize the programs by the end of 2017, they were going to go away. It was a hard fight, but we were successful in convincing Congress to save the programs. And not only were they reauthorized, both houses of Congress approved the bills unanimously, which is the first time that's ever happened. So we were pretty excited about that. We'll now continue to have the grant programs through 2023. There is a sunset provision for 2024, but we should be able to take care of that fairly easily.
You know, and I'd be remiss if we didn't acknowledge Senator John McCain. As many of you know, Senator McCain passed away last August after fighting a battle with cancer. He was our last remaining co-chairman to serve on the Fire Caucus, and our original member to serve on the Fire Caucus, excuse me. And one of the last pieces of legislation that was approved was the reauthorization legislation that Senator McCain authored on the Senate side. So we can't thank the senator enough for his support, and it was truly a huge loss for the fire service as well as for America when he did lose that battle.
Another very important initiative that our organizations came together to tackle was the creation of the Firefighter Cancer Registry. I think we're all well aware of the increased incidences of cancer among the fire services compared to the general population. So once again, you know, happily managed to get this passed unanimously by both houses of Congress. And what this will do is now the Centers for Disease Control will start a specialized registry looking at firefighter cancer incidences. They'll be able to collect this information, and it'll be a resource for researchers to look at and hopefully find ways that we can continue to battle cancer in the fire service. So, Fire Sprinkler Incentive Act. My good friend Jim Dalton often talks about this as pushing a really big rock up the hill. 15 years our organizations advocated for this on Capitol Hill. I'm sure many of you will remember the tragic station nightclub fire in Rhode Island where we lost 100 people. You know, there were no sprinklers, many other problems in the property. Shortly before that happened, National Fire Sprinkler Association, NFPA, several other organizations, including CFSI, were looking at ways that we could incentivize the retrofit of fire sprinklers in some of these properties. So we managed to, in the tax package that was passed in the previous Congress, to get some incentives in a section called 179. This is basically allows small, medium-sized businesses to fully expense equipment purchases for their businesses. So we managed to have retrofit of fire sprinklers classified under that section. So now small and medium-sized businesses will be able to fully expense up to, I believe, $1 million, Bill.
Yep, that's
retrofit of a sprinkler system. So also included in that bill, we tried to get a provision that would change the depreciation schedule of a retrofit of fire sprinklers. Right now, it's 39 years for commercial property, 27 and a half for commercial residential property. The bill intended to lower that to 15 years and also build in an accelerated bonus depreciation over 10 years. Unfortunately, what was agreed upon and what ended up in the final draft of the bill was a little different. Basically, somebody literally cut and forgot to paste. And sadly, that's what happens when you write a bill at 3 a.m. on a Sunday. So the bill was scored as if that provision was in there, all of the reports that accompanied it, but in the actual legislative text that Congress passed and the president signed, they had inadvertently left out that provision. So Congress is hoping to tackle some technical corrections for the tax bill this year, and we are strongly advocating that be included. And we have a coalition of not just fire service organizations, but a lot of commercial interests. So there's a coalition of about 200 different associations all working towards that aim. So hopefully we'll be successful with that. But what was passed is still a great victory for the fire service, and wholeheartedly give so much credit to Jim and the folks at the National Fire Sprinkler Association for fighting so hard and not giving up over 15 years to get that done. That was truly, Bill, I think it's fair to say the force of will of one man made that happen. So.
Indeed, indeed. And I'd like to add too, it was a 15-year effort, and the big challenge now is getting this information out. And so if there's one message we would like to impart with you is to help us get the message out. National Fire Sprinkler Association, their website address is nfsa.org. They have information that can be made available to local businesses that discuss the benefits of the incentive. And so if you're in an area and you've got contacts with the business community and you know of properties that are not sprinklered that might qualify, we would really ask you to share this information with them, because again, it was a huge lift on the part of a lot of folks, but the big challenge for us now is making sure that we can get this information out where the rubber meets the road, so we get more of these properties protected with the automatic fire sprinklers.
So a few other bills that passed. Honoring Hometown Heroes Act. Seems like a simple thing, but I think very meaningful for a lot of people. This allows state governors to order the U.S. flag to be flown at half-staff in the event of a first responder line of duty death. We got some changes made to the tax treatment for LoSAP programs, which will hopefully address some of those issues. The Public Safety Benefits Improvement Act. The PSOB program, it's a program within the Department of Justice, provides survivor benefits to the families of fallen and disabled public safety officers. It's a program that we've worked very closely on for many, many years. The staff there does great work, but there are always some issues with the program. And so the PSOB Improvements Act made some reforms there and also increased transparency so that families and stakeholders have a better idea of what's going on with their claims. And then the Protecting Patient Access to Emergency Medications Act, that simply reaffirmed the ability of EMS providers to dispense controlled substances under standing orders. So there were some questions about that practice, and the DA was looking at some things. So Congress passed that just to clarify that that is still the way to do things.
Okay. What we attempted to illustrate in this slide here is the importance of working in the spirit of bipartisanship. This slide, again, you see on the left-hand side, it goes back to 1999. That's when we first started looking at the AFG SAFER program. Actually, it started out as AFG only. And throughout the last, 20 years, we've gone through a reauthorization process for that legislation. Sean, correct me, it might be 3 times. We've got that program funded every year. We've had reauthorization of U.S. Fire Administration about 3 or 4 times during that time. Sean alluded to some of the achievements in the last legislative session, but if you go further back, we've done a lot of great work with the PSOB program, the National Broadband System. We're setting up a nationwide broadband system for public safety purposes. We've done an awful lot with the Congress, and again, we do. We've been asked before. Do you work better with a Republican-controlled? Do you work better with a Democratic-controlled Congress? What about the White House? We work well with everyone. We work well no matter who's in charge of the Congress and who's in charge of the White House. And again, that goes back to the ability to work in the spirit of bipartisanship. That goes back to our relationship with the leaders of the Congressional Fire Services Caucus. And it has a lot to do with the cooperative effort and the cooperative spirit of all the national fire organizations that are willing, again, to go up to Capitol Hill and not make partisan issues out of these issues that we're addressing, but to reach out to Republicans and to reach out to Democrats. So you have your members back in your congressional districts. You know, you might not always agree with them on a political level, but again, you need to educate them. You need to form these positive working relationships with them, because you never know who's going to be in charge of the Congress in the next session. Right now, we're dealing with a split Congress. The Senate is being controlled by the Republicans. They have 53 members, and there's 45 Democrats, 2 independents who caucus with the Democrats. And again, as you see in the House, 235 Democrats, 199 Republicans, and there's one race to be determined in North Carolina. And of course, you have President Trump in the White House. But again, it's all about working together. It's about working in the spirit of bipartisanship. It's about reaching out to your members, regardless of what party affiliation they are, what party affiliation you are. And if you have questions about the issues, we are a good source of information. Sean keeps track of all the legislative issues. And again, we will, at the end of this presentation, give you our email addresses. So if you ever have a question about the Congress and about some of the issues that are coming down the pike, please use us as a resource. And so what I'd like to do is have Sean talk about some of the priorities that we are looking at for 2019 and how members of the ISFSI can help us in this regard. Sean?
Yeah, thanks, Phil. So one of our main focuses is going to be Fire Caucus recruitment. Bill's spoken about the Fire Caucus. It really is a prestigious group of members, and really willing to put aside their party affiliations and work towards issues that will benefit the fire service. I think when I first started at CFSI, we had 370 members of Congress on the Fire Caucus. It was the largest caucus at the time. It is still one of the largest caucuses, but membership has dropped significantly. The past just 3 or 4 elections, we've had significant turnover on Capitol Hill, and when that happens and you have the largest caucus, you lose a lot of your members. So we are currently standing at 199 members on the caucus. We have several states that have no representation on the caucus whatsoever. You know, I think a lot of fire service leaders have good relationships with their members of Congress. So I guess one thing I would ask is just go on our website, take a look at the caucus list, see if your members of Congress are members of the Fire Caucus, and if not, reach out to them and just explain to them it's a way that they can show their support for the fire service. And, you know, if they are a member, you know, encourage them to become more actively involved. You know, we're always looking for future leaders. As Bill said, we're working with the current caucus leadership to replace Congressman Reichert after his retirement. And, you know, I'm sure that hopefully none of them go anywhere in the near future, but we'll have openings in the leadership in the future. And we want those members to, you know, those spots to be filled by members who have been actively engaged. So I think we're all aware that there's a partial government shutdown right now, which has kind of brought a lot of legislation to a screaming halt on Capitol Hill as they try and figure out how to wrap up funding for fiscal year 19 and get the government back open, and then start tackling fiscal year 20. So, you know, as Bill said, one of the departments that is closed is Department of Homeland Security, which houses FEMA and the fire grants. Obviously, USFA is there. National Fire Academy. You know, unfortunately, they've had to cancel, I believe, 17 classes, affecting over 300 students at this point. You know, a lot of local departments are waiting to hear if they got a fire grant, if they got a SAFER grant. That's not going to happen until the government reopens. I believe the help desk at the fire grants office is still taking calls, but they're not going to be able to tell you much about the status of your grant until we resolve this. Hopefully that doesn't last much longer, and we can get these programs funded and back out there helping folks. one issue we're going to be looking at is back when Congress created the nationwide public safety broadband network, which is now FirstNet. They reallocated the D block in order to do that. As part of the legislation for that, public safety was going to have to give up spectrum on the T band. Unfortunately, for about 11 major municipalities, there's just nowhere for them to go. And we're talking about places like New York, Boston. So we're working with Congress to try and find a way that we can keep those municipalities on the T band and see if there's something else we can work on there. Let's see. Bill mentioned we're going to be looking at firefighter mental health and wellness. So working with a number of our partner organizations, and I'll give the International Association of Firefighters a lot of credit for this. They've really spearheaded this. But hopefully in the coming months, we'll be rolling out a first responder mental health and wellness legislative package that'll have things, encouraging peer counseling and resources for that, and a few other things. And then we need to fully reauthorize the September 11th Victims Compensation Fund. All of you will remember a few years ago, Congress reauthorized the Zadroga Act, which permanently reauthorized the World Trade Center Health Program and reauthorized the VCF for a few more years. But that authorization is about to run out. They're about to run out of money. So we want to make sure that for the people that need to access that program, that's still going to be around.
Sounds good. Before I talk about the dinner, the legislative process. If you go on our website, actually you can see the address down there, www.cfsi.org. There is you can click legislation and advocacy, and that does provide a list of the legislation that CFSI is advocating for up on Capitol Hill. And again, these are issues that our National Advisory Committee has supported. If you go on that site and you see a piece of legislation and you click on the bill number, that's going to direct you to a site called Thomas. And once you get on that page, you're going to get all the information you need about that legislation. That would actually help you talk to your members of Congress. It will tell you whether or not your member of Congress is actually a co-sponsor of that piece of legislation. It'll tell you the number of co-sponsors. You can get a printout of that piece of legislation. And you can, again, see what the current status is of that legislation. Legislation moves, it can move rather quickly, or it could be like the Sprinkler Act and move rather slowly, 15-year process. A lot of it, and Sean is a master at this, but a lot of it has to come down to timing. If a bill is going through the legislative process, it's up for a committee hearing or it's up for a vote at the committee level, that's when the fire service members need to get engaged. That's when you need to pick up your phone and call your members of Congress. If you can contact Sean after this presentation so we can get you on our email list, he can get you the information you need when these bills come up, when certain types of action is needed. Because again, at the end of the day, it really boils down to timing up on Capitol Hill. Now, having said that, I think some of you probably attended our program, our big annual program, the National Fire and Emergency Services Symposium and Dinner. It is our major fundraising program throughout the year. This year's program is April 24th and 25th, 2019. Why come to that program? It provides a great opportunity to interact with federal leaders. U.S. Fire Administrator folks from FEMA, they make it a point to be at the hotel, to have a presence there, so that they can talk to their constituents. Those constituents are you. It's a great way to establish contacts. All the presidents and leaders of the various national organizations are there. The state level organization leaders are there. And it's a great way to acquire new knowledge. I really want to pay recognition to ISFSI, who's helping us in this effort to attract the future leaders of the fire service. We really need to do that. We need to find out who those young leaders are who can step forward and become the next leaders of CFSI, ISFSI, and all the other organizations. because we can't have a vacuum. We need somebody to carry the ball forward for us so that we have a presence up on Capitol Hill. We have a presence in the state capitals, because without that presence, federal legislators, state legislators, they're not going to hear from us. And therefore, you know, there's that saying, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. We need to keep the message flowing forward, and we need people to present that message. Sean has put together two great programs, seminar program. It's a 2-day program. Participants do get CEU credits. National leaders are going to be leading these seminars covering a variety of national issues. It's all available on our website. And we do have our awards program where we present 4 major awards. As you can see, your former president, Steve Pegram, is up there in that picture because we honored the ISFSI and UL last year with our Senator Sarbanes Award for your excellent work in reducing the number of deaths and injuries in the fire service through your training programs, through your principles of modern fire attack curriculum. So the purpose of the dinner program is, again, to acknowledge outstanding leadership. And we certainly appreciate the support we have received from ISFSI throughout the year. We are a clearinghouse of information. We're there to answer your questions about what's going on up on Capitol Hill. And so if there's ever an opportunity for us to help you out, please give us a call, because that is our mission in Washington, D.C. So having said that, on behalf of Sean, on behalf of our board of directors, I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to kind of share a little bit about what we do in Washington, D.C. And again, hopefully we can form some great relationships in moving forward as a result of this presentation. There's our website, there's our email addresses. Please feel free to email us anytime you have questions. And as I always say, our office in Washington, D.C. is your office. We actually moved across the river. We're in Arlington. But if your travels ever bring you to the Washington, D.C. area, please stop by our office so we can sit down and chat about what's going on and just kind of hear what's on your mind. So, Jamie, having said that, again, I'd like to thank you personally for allowing us this opportunity. And again, please convey our thanks and appreciation to President Wells for this opportunity. If you have any questions, we'd certainly be like to answer them for you.
Right. Thanks, Bill and Sean. That was a lot of great information that you shared. I'd like to take just a few minutes. If anybody has any questions or comments, go ahead and put them in the chat box there, and we'll have Bill and Sean address them as they come through. Bill, one thing that I did want to mention or ask is, I know you talked about how CFSI is funded, but how can someone become a member?
Well, again, we are unlike ISFSI, IFF, IFC, and all the other organizations in that we don't have individual membership. If you do look on our webpage, we do have what's called the Associates Club program. And that is a program that's available to individuals who want to support our mission. By becoming an Associate Club member, we will put you on our list, so that when we do have messages to share with the fire service, you are among those recipients of that information. So again, you can help us carry our message forward up on Capitol Hill. So basically, yes, go on our website and look at the Associates Club program.
And the other thing is, how do you learn if their member of Congress is serving on the Congressional Fire Services Caucus?
Sean?
On our website, we have a list of all the caucus members with links to their official web pages. You can go on, and it's separated out by state, so we actually have a drop-down menu. It'll bring you right to your state. You can take a look and see who's there.
And if they're not, how do they become a member of, a member of Congress to join the caucus?
So they can reach out to one of the current co-chairs, or they can just reach out right to us, and I'll get them hooked up with the co-chairs and add them to the list.
Couple of things there too, Jamie. One, the caucus. The caucus is all about education. You know, we don't expect every caucus member to vote the way we want anytime there's a piece of legislation that comes before Congress. By becoming a caucus member, basically what they're doing is they're pledging to learn a little bit more about the federal programs that benefit the fire service. Secondly, when your members do make that call to Capitol Hill to their member offices, and Sean can chime in here, ask for the congressional staffer who is assigned either to Homeland Security issues or fire service issues. And if they have any questions about the mission, the expectations, the role of the caucus, they should call Sean or even just look on our website to find out more information. Because again, that's the important point that needs to be made about the caucus and what the expectations are for becoming a member.
Yeah, one thing I always point out is we have some universal fire service issues, but really the need of every local fire department is going to be different from congressional district to congressional district. So we just ask the members support their local fire service in the best way they can. And when you look at the membership of the Fire Caucus, you know, we have some folks on there that are very much to the left and very much to the right. Probably one of the few things they agree on is their support of the fire service. So we're pretty proud of that.
Awesome. It looks like I don't see any more questions, just people thanking you guys. Your work is much needed and appreciated.
Again, thank you very much.
And I just want to mention CFSI does do a monthly update that's posted in the ISFSI newsletter, the Academy. So you can stick around and see the updates that they provide on a monthly basis. And lastly, if you've got any suggestions for a future topic or presenter, or would like to present a webinar yourself, send us an email, give us a call. We've got a webinar committee put together that reviews them, and we'll work with you with any questions or concerns that you may have about presenting a webinar. And they are actually putting together a webinar that will be based on presenting webinars. So if you've got any issues with doing a webinar yourself, that will be helpful for you. And someone did ask if this is going to be recorded, and yes, it's being recorded and will be shared on the ISFSI website for future tuning in. Well, thanks again, Bill and Sean. I know you shared your contact information on the previous screen, but if anybody has any questions after this webinar, please feel free to get in touch with them. They're super helpful and will be there for you when you need them. I hope everybody has a great rest of their day, and we'll talk to you next month. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.